Hello and welcome to the AVRUM ROSENSWEIG show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello and welcome to the AVRUM ROSENSWEIG show. My name is AVRUM ROSENSWEIG, and I am here with my colleague, my partner, my friend, Rabbi Shlomo Gemara, and we will be doing today Parsha and Prose. How are you, Rabbi?
Baruch Hashem. After a week that we took a break for Pesach, I was looking forward to have our program renewed.
I also was looking forward to. How was your Pesach?
It was very nice. First of all, we stayed in Toronto. One child came from Israel, one child came from LA. We had our daughter here and our son here. It was very nice. It became a rare occasion when you can see all your children at once. Half of them is not bad, Baruch Hashem.
No, thank God for that. I also had a beautiful Pesach. I did a Seder with my friend Bert. It was the first Sephardic Seder that I'd ever attended, and I loved it. I think it's called the Elula, where they put the Passovers, they touch your head, the top of your head with the Seder plate, and then they go to the next person. And then the next night I did a Seder for 200 people at the Bernard Battelle Center, which is a seniors program place up in the northern part of Toronto. And that was magnificent. I just enjoyed that so much. So, Rabbi, I have a question for you. Did you indeed feel like you were at Yetziat Mitzrayim, that you were one of the Jews going out of Egypt?
That's a very good question. I hope so. I think that the Seder gave me, at least in certain time, this feeling that, wow, I belong to a long chain of history, and it's fantastic that I know actually what was the meal, the menu that my forefather ate at this very night about 4,000 years ago. It's not a simple thing. I don't think that people keep this kind of tradition. But I can tell you 100%, I ate what my great parents 4,000 years ago ate at this night, and it's a fantastic feeling. And I try to give it over to my children and grandchildren now.
Did you have good Torah at the table?
A good Torah, you know what? For years, we used to say all kind of what we call words, like ideas about this difficulty and this difficulty. What I learned over time that sometimes all these trees distract you from seeing the forest. The forest is the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, understanding what happens. The story, simply the story. Understand what happened, how the plagues were part of the process, what was their purpose, and so on. So we try more to focus on this one, to develop like discussions, and not so much Divrei Torah, the classic one that I find sometimes distracting from the purpose of the Seder. Sometimes you have these students in class. They ask you a fantastic question, but they can derail the entire lesson with their fantastic questions. Yes. And you have to say, okay, you know what? Let's talk about it another time. I feel many times the same about these kind of questions that are great questions, but not for the Seder night. Like, I have a lesson, I have a curriculum. Let me stick to the curriculum. Don't try to derail me with all kind of good questions.
So a few weeks ago, I was doing my shir on Thursday night. I call it my Chavrusa shir. And it's great. Nobody is muted. Everybody can talk. We want to hear from everybody, which reflects the fact that everybody's voice is important. Anyways, I was trying to teach them about korbanot, and I was very serious because one can really go down the wrong road when it comes to korbanot. I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from Parsha and Prose. And the class was going off the rails and asking other questions because they were bored. And I said, you need to concentrate. Okay, we will talk about those questions. They're good questions, but now we need to determine what is why. So I understand what you're saying. Rabbi, I want to talk for a few minutes about Yom Hashawaura. Yom Hashawaura, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, is a solemn day in the Jewish calendar dedicated to the commemorating the 6 million Jews and millions of others murdered during the Holocaust. It starts tomorrow night and runs until the 24th. And I know it's near and dear to your heart. What will you be doing on Yom Hashawaura?
So first of all, let me tell you, on Pesach, my wife suggested that we will go down to the Rome. They have an exhibition, a special exhibition about Auschwitz. In hindsight, maybe it was a mistake because I was like down for 2-3 days, just to see it in the middle of Yom Tov and Chol HaMoed was not the best uplifting experiences. For few reasons, maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. But Yom HaShoah, as I grew up, and I remember it very vividly, like was the Yom Kippur of the year. I remember that my parents were glued to this, like the TV shows. Like it was like a shrine. You couldn't talk at home at this day. You could not say anything. I do remember, especially my mother was extremely sensitive on this day and helped to develop this kind of reverence, fear maybe, of the day. It was like imminent in my life as a child. And then as a young child, I did not know what my mother went through. It took me until this very day to understand like what kind of experiences to grow without your parents, knowing that your parents were deported and in a decision of the last minute to leave you with non-Jewish neighbors, not knowing what will happen with you. I think that my mother carried as a serious scar until this very day. I remember my in-laws, both of them Holocaust survivors from the worst experiences in camps. They buried these scars until they were buried, until the last moment. My mother-in-law, like Auschwitz, was kind of alive in everything she did, spoke about, and thought about.
Rabbi, the official name and meaning is Yom HaShoah v'Hagivura, meaning the day of the Holocaust and heroism. It commemorates both the victims and the acts of resistance during the Holocaust. It was established in 1951, and it emphasizes the loss and the courage, which we'll find in Parsha Shmini, and the interplay between courage and tragedy. Knowing that your parents, knowing that your in-laws were both in the Holocaust, what particular feeling did you have of them as parents and in-laws that I may not have because my parents were born in Toronto?
I would say a sense of amazement to restart and to rebuild a world from ashes. My in-laws came from the fires of Auschwitz, losing all their families, and they built a new moshav in Israel. And as I said, this was like my mother-in-law, Zichronah Livracha, her yahrzeit was just a week ago. Her first yahrzeit, she always said, with every grandchild, with every grand-grandchild, this is my victory over Hitler. So, like, for her, life was something very different from me and you, because everything was connected to where she came from and how she viewed the progress and the development and the continuation of the Jewish people.
Rabbi, one thing that we rarely ever talk about is being humiliated. That's not talked a lot about when we learn Holocaust education because it's humiliating.
Very.
But did you ever have that sense that your parents were humiliated and your in-laws were humiliated by the Nazis? And how did that play out with you?
Terribly, yes. This is the most, I would say, the strongest sense of Holocaust for me as a second generation. The humiliation of individuals and the nation. Like you take, especially when I came from Auschwitz, you see that how like people, your grandparents, the people that could be alive today, and you would have a triple time the cousins you have, and the people who were just lost because the barbarism. You cannot even find like the right description for this behavior. Um, um, this is very humiliating. I honestly was offered few times to go to Auschwitz, as an educator. I can't do it. I feel that seeing the ramp, seeing the place where Jews were treated worse than animals is going to break me as a person, and maybe as a religious person. Um, uh, to me, it's like a black hole where everything just crushed into itself and collapsed into itself. Um, and I can see it in my imagination. I can see the people, led naked to the gas chamber. Parents see their children the last time. They're waiting until the crematorium is empty, and you can bring the new deportees. For me, this feeling of humiliation is like I feel it in every bone of my body. And I don't want
Rabbi,
to re-experience it. I cannot go to these camps. And on one hand, I think that I told you I wanted all my kids to go there, and they went. For me, it's going to be, I am afraid, like a breaking point, which I don't want to experience.
yeah, me too. Rabbi, is your relationship with your beard rooted at all in the Holocaust? I ask this because of the classic pictures, the humiliated rabbis and elderly Jews who were having their beards cut off by the Nazis. When you think about your beard, or when you relate to your beard, maybe when you trim it, does that come into play at all?
You know what? It's a fantastic question because let me tell you, I'll take you like 40 years back. My wife didn't like, she was not fond of me having a beard. She said that I was looking better when I did not have a beard, and she might be right. But she told me many, many times that she will never ask me to shave my beard after seeing these
Yes.
pictures of Jews, because beard represent in a way Jewish pride. And, hair taste is not going to overcome a shaving beard. So for sure, with my wife, it resonated. These pictures of like humiliating Jews by taking off their beard, and to me, it's also important. I'm not telling you that I see it all the time in front of me, but I can relate to it very, very well. A beard somehow is a religious symbol. Listen, it's not saying in the Torah or anything, but over the generation, and by the way, not only in Jewish culture, it became a symbol. Um, Rabbis normally going with the beard, and Hasidim going with the beard. So yes, there is an element which the inverse picture are the Nazis taking pleasure by cutting the beards of Jews on a random basis, sometimes just stopping a Jew on the street.
Rabbi, yesterday I did a podcast with 4 panelists in Rwanda, and they were in a village which was started by a very righteous Rwandan Tutsi. His name is Albert, and it's going to take a while for me to get the podcast up and running because, firstly, they were running on Rwandan time, which means we started an hour late, and technically it was not up to snuff. That being said, they started a village whereby they brought together the Hutus and the Tutsis. The Hutus being the one responsible for the genocide against the Tutsis. And on that panel were 2 individuals who were victims, who were inside of a Roman Catholic church. And that church was surrounded by Hutus, and people mostly were murdered inside of that church. They were macheted to death, and terrible, terrible ways of executing them. Now, the two on my show were indeed the Hutus who were responsible for that massacre. And the other two were, as I said a moment ago, were individuals who were inside the church. One was a woman who was raped repeatedly. They came together through Albert's efforts to create some sort of reconciliation and stop the violence. And I interviewed both of them, all of them. And it was fascinating. It was very difficult and technically a mess. But what I heard from them was that from the victims that they were forgiving. And what I heard from the Hutus who were responsible for the genocide was that they accepted what they had done. They apologized profusely and continued to do so. And I asked one of the men, who you can see the depth of brokenness inside that man. I said, do you believe that you should be forgiven? And he looked at me and he said, I do not. I do not. When you think about Yom Hashawaura and the Nazis and the aftermath of Germany, it seems like the Germans made a real effort to reconciliate with us. Do you want to comment on that at all?
This is a very difficult question. I will start from one step before that, which I think is ignored in the discussion. Unfortunately, although the Holocaust is something that everyone knows about and everyone discuss and learn, and I think even in Canada it's part of the curriculum, the required curriculum, which is very important in my opinion. I have to tell you that one of the reasons I came back from the Auschwitz exhibition very down is not only the horrors that are kind of like not reenacted, but like being back to your memory, to your existence, to your understanding. But I felt in a way a little bit that all these exhibitions, unfortunately, I will say it in a very sharp way, and I will try to explain it, to soften it a little bit, are murdering my grandparents the second time. Mm-hmm. And I will explain you why I say that. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what is the message of the Holocaust to the generations after? And let me tell you that I was in few Holocaust displays and museums and people talking about it, and even people who come to talk about their own experience in the Holocaust. And somehow it ends up, guys, we should not hate each other. We all the same. Hatred lead to terrible things, and we have to be much more tolerant to the different between us. Now, it's a very important message. But this was not the Holocaust for me as a Jew. There was an element, ideological element here. I don't think, and we are not in competition, but I don't think that the Roma, what some people call the Gypsies, Holocaust, and they also were murdered, I think, by the hundreds of thousands. And the Jewish Holocaust is the same. When you kill a person, you kill a person. It's very true. But the drive was different. And I feel many, many times that not mentioning the fact that the main reason for the Holocaust was not the hatred for the different, for the stranger, for someone else, but to the Jews is not mentioned enough. The ideology of Hitler is well documented in his own books. He thoroughly believed that the Jewish people and their ideology and their musar, their morals, are a distracting force in the world. That's why he was so obsessed of killing the Jews. And I don't see that enough, unfortunately. I see very secular, general, universal messages about the Holocaust, and I feel that there is here something that is not recognized, and I would also say is dangerous to the world and dangerous to the Jewish people themselves. Because we have to understand why people are hating us. We have to understand what is unique in our tradition, in our way of life, in our morals that make us a target. And if you just want a proof to it, see what happened in the world after October 7th. You would assume that a second Holocaust will create the same response that the Jewish people benefited from, so to speak, after the Holocaust. No, exactly the opposite happened. And I'll tell you, after visiting the exhibition of Auschwitz, I understand why it happened. Because if you universalize the Holocaust, if you make it just about suffering of one ethnic group over the other, it's very, very easy to make the Jews the new Nazis and the Palestinians, for example, the new Jews. And I say it with utmost concern because it was not about oppression, which, by the way, does not exist. We just want actually the Palestinians to have their country. And I'm sorry that I slide into this issue, but it's very, very important if we want to understand why the Holocaust is not like a huge block against anti-Semitism. It's because we, in part, made the Holocaust universal and not a Jewish experience. And part of the reason is, I'm afraid to say, that some of us as Jews don't understand it, don't understand this point. They again focus on the being different, being with different traditions, but this is not the reason why Hitler wanted to get eliminated of the Jews. So I'm sorry that I spoke too much, but it's really like very strong in me, like that you can learn a lot about something, and at the end of the day, you don't understand the core issue. The core issue. I remember that Harvard University did like an experiment to physics students in Harvard, and they asked them questions about what is going to happen when a car, for example, is going to take a sharp turn to the right. And students of physics in Harvard continued to think through their guts and did not apply the law they learned to applying it to real cases. And I feel the same here. You can learn a lot about the Holocaust and to know about the camp and the camps and the marches and the torture and the hunger and everything. And at the end of the day, you will not get the main lesson of the Holocaust. There is a special nation, the Jewish people. We suffer for being Jewish. We were over the history. It did not start with the Germans, although they made it on an unfathomable scale. That the hatred for the Jews was not because they were different, because they were different morally. They presented an alternative way of life. And this, unfortunately, is forgotten.
Your point is well taken. I will tell you, though, by universalizing the lessons of the Holocaust, when I spoke with my Rwandan friends yesterday, excuse me, I was educated on how Albert came about developing this village, bringing together the Hutus and the Tutsis. And in part, it was what he had been educated on through the Shoah Foundation. So that's not really what you're talking about when you say universalize. I understand what you're saying. But I will tell you, on a positive note, that many nations around the world have taken lessons from the Holocaust.
Absolutely. I say it's very, very important.
It's
very important. But
yeah.
I think if I could bring back my grandparents and their shtetl and their communities, and they would hear this, they would, as they say in Yiddish, they would plot. They wouldn't believe that that what the world took from the Holocaust. So it's highly important. Don't misunderstand me. I said it at the first sentence. It's highly important that people will see indeed also the universal value of like going and destroying a nation with such vengeance and cruelty and barbarism. Of course, the world has a lot to learn just from the fact that there was a Holocaust. For me as a Jew, for us as Jews, for the world to understand what the Jews mean, I think focusing only on the destruction and Auschwitz and the smoke and the crematorium will or might bring again hatred to the Jews themselves. That's my concern. That's my concern. And if we are not going to demand the world to understand who are the Jews, what are we standing for, we might lose the lessons from the Holocaust. Because at a certain point, 100 years down the road, people will be too tired to hear again Holocaust, 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 Holocaust. They are looking for something more exciting and more relatable to their own life, 100 years, 200 years down the road. But if the message of the Holocaust is going to be well learned, it might inspire nations. It might inspire them to understand how unique is the Jewish story. And not because it was under such a destruction in the Holocaust years, but what beauty and richness and depth like was eliminated from this world.
Rabbi, Israel is back in Gaza, as we know. Our hostages, many of them are still being kept in tunnels and other such places in Gaza. And for a moment before we launch into Parsha and Prose, I would like to make a blessing on behalf of the IDF soldiers and the hostages. We lift up the hostages in Gaza held in fear and uncertainty. Surround them with your peace, God, that surpasses understanding. Protect them from harm and guide them swiftly to safety and freedom. Grant their families strength and hope in this trial, to serve with courage in dangerous places. Shield them with your divine protection and give them wisdom in their decisions and strength in their resolve. May their actions be guided by justice and compassion, and may they return home safely to their loved ones. In your mercy, bring resolution, healing, and peace to all affected by this conflict in Eretz Yisrael. Amen.
Amen.
So I took your advice about trying other AI tools, and your advice was very good. And I started trying out Grok, GROK.com. And you're going to hear the difference between some previous ideas or questions that I've developed through ChatGPT and Grok. And I think that I like Grok a lot more because it's richer in substance and in character. So let me introduce Parsha and Prose. Welcome to Parsha and Prose, where the timeless wisdom of the Torah meets the enduring insight of great literature. Each week, we dive into the Parsha through the lens of literary masterpieces, uncovering fresh perspectives on life, faith, and purpose. This week, we're exploring Shmini portion from Leviticus that brings us the inauguration of the tabernacle, the tragic loss of Aaron's sons, and the law of kashrut, kosher. It is a parsha of highs and lows, sacred service, sudden grief, and the search for meaning in a world of divine commands. To guide us, we are turning to Viktor Frankl's Man in Search of Meaning, a very profound reflection on finding purpose amid suffering, drawn from Frankl's experience in the Holocaust itself. How does Shmini's story of ritual, loss, and boundaries speak to Frankl's belief that meaning can be found in every moment, even in the darkest moments? And what can these ancient and modern texts teach us about navigating our own challenges today? So join us as we weave Parsha and Prose, blending the altar's fire with the human spirit's resilience. Let us get started. Rabbi, how did you bring the Parsha Shmini together with Man's Search for Meaning?
Well, in the Parsha Shmini, you have the unbelievable story of the death of two sons of Aaron, but not only that, which is an awful tragedy when a person loses one child but losing two. But in the occasion is a momentous occasion of simcha of the entire nation, inauguration of the and dedication of the temple, and in the middle, the person who represent the temple, the main figure in the temple, Aaron, is losing his two children who apparently would be replacing him when he will get old or dying. And I'm sure that the shock of everyone was so great, and people could not grasp with what happened. So this was a private Holocaust for Aaron, and I wanted to connect it to Frankel, to Viktor Frankel, because Frankel, interestingly enough, is talking about how we deal with tragedies. Not so much about the items that make a tragedy, not so much with the event itself, not so much about the people that were affected. He is looking for finding a meaning and the ability to find a meaning in order to make a tragedy a meaningful experience. And by this, he developed a whole system of logotherapy. And I find this very, very important. The question is, okay, the Holocaust happened. We lost families, we lost millions of people, we lost communities, we lost traditions. What next? How are we dealing with it? And I think our Parsha provides some ideas, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, especially with the proximity to Yom Hashawaura and VAYIKRA.
Rabbi, just a little bit more about Man's Search for Meaning and Parsha Shmini. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is a profound and enduring work that blends memoir, psychology, and philosophy. And by the way, I believe it's one of the most popular books ever written and sold. It was published in 1946, and it recounts Frankl's experience as a Holocaust survivor in Nazi concentration camps, where he develops logotherapy, which is a motif or a mode of psychology. And essentially, it's a therapeutic approach centered on finding purpose in life, which I like very much, by the way. I love logotherapy. The book is divided into two parts, a harrowing yet introspective narrative of his camp experience, and then an introduction to logotherapy's principles. We'll talk more about it as we go, but I do suggest very strongly, and I'm sure, Rabbi, you join me in this, that if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, then order it on Amazon or go to your favorite bookstore.
I think it's a must reading. One of the books which is must reading. You are going to be surprised, AVRUM, that actually one of the recommender of this book to therapists all over the world was Lubavitcher Rebbe. He saw this book, not only the wisdom in the book and the approach to logotherapy, but he saw it as I would say, countering the philosophies of Freud, Jung, that based more on the history of a human being, the conflicts with parents, guilt emotions, and so on. And he replaced, and by the way, both of them were his rebbes. He learned by both of them, but he developed something very different, which, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, much more aligned with the Jewish philosophy of, okay, we don't look too much to the past. You find yourself in a situation, how you react to it, because in many, many ways, Jewish life is a reaction to where you are. You are rich, you have these duties. You are poor, you have these duties. You are owning a farm, you have this duty. Every person has duties and purpose in the situation that he found himself in. Like you cannot say, okay, Torah was given only for people in this country or in this season or in this community or with this level of IQ. The Torah give every person of us a duty, a mission in life. So the theory of Viktor Frankl, um, I would say in many, many ways was very, very close to the understanding of the Torah about human being. And we do know that one of the strengths of Chabad is to say, like, you find yourself in a situation, you have a mission. You don't ignore it. You actually find every difficulty as an opportunity to grow on. And I think in this regard, with all the difficulty that maybe we will talk about the personal life of Frankel, the Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged him to continue with his work, even at times when, especially in the 50s, many people disagreed with his theories, which departed from, as I say, Freud and Jung and other classic psychologists.
There are logotherapy, by the way. Rabbi, you helped me understand something. I once asked you if you've ever been in therapy, and you said no. And now I understand why. Because
except of your podcast, which I always like go out and I said, wow, this was a good therapy time, and I didn't have to pay.
No, I'll send you my bill. But I've been in copious amounts of therapy throughout the years, which I find has been helpful. But because you correlate logotherapy with the Torah or vice versa, and more so than you would Freudian psychology or therapy, it makes sense because you've ensconced yourself in the study of Torah. So the study of Torah in of itself has been therapeutic for you. Would that be accurate?
100%. I think that many times when people don't know what to do, how to react, as a rabbi, I tell people, you know what, I don't want to be in your situation, but I know what the Torah requires you to do at this point. And sometimes it's very, very difficult situation where people face like Aaron, like the death of people who are very close to them, if it's parents, lo aleinu, children, and so on. But the Torah guides us in this situation. I would say one thing which is highly, highly important, and I think is well agreed upon modern psychology. Do something. Do something. Something terrible happened to you. Find a way to do something for the community, for your shul, for people that you like. Doing things help us to grasp also the tragedy or how to deal with it, how to grow from it. And I saw in my life, unfortunately, especially as a rabbi and as a teacher, I saw people that tragedies caused them to collapse inside, like their life shattered at this point. At the same time, I saw people that a tragedy develop a sense of purpose, a self of doing something, and they grew so much as a result of the tragedy. Of course, we don't ask for tragedies to change our life, but I think that Viktor Frankl was 100% when he say that it's not the tragedy which is matter, it's the way we react to it is matter. And I saw it in my experience time again and again.
Rabbi, how does Aaron's silence after the death of his sons reflect choice in suffering? And let me just expand on that. After his son's death, Aaron is silent, as it says in Leviticus 10:3. Frankl writes, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude, which is what you were just alluding to. How does Aaron's silence then demonstrate a choice to find meaning in grief and what we can learn from it in our own losses?
So, what interesting is, I think in chapter 3, Frankl is talking about the value of silence. He said that many times in the camps, after terrible days when they saw torture and hanging and all kinds of things, he saw that people come back to the banks and they were silent. And that's how they dealt with all the awful sights they saw at the same day. So the silence of Aaron could be interpreted in many, many ways. It could be a collapse inside his world. The silence can be at the same time viewed as, and you know, sometimes people after a tragedy like that, they simply can't talk. Can't talk. I was once coming to a family to tell about a tragedy that happened to their grandchild. Hashem Yishmerenu v'yatzilenu. You know, one of the most awful things that you have in the army are the people that knock on the door to tell the parents or to tell the grandparents or other relatives about what happened. That's Hashem Yishmerenu v'yatzilenu. You can't imagine what kind of mission is this one, the most awful one. But people has to do it, obviously. And at least in one case, I just saw like the air going outside, and the grandfather just sat on the sofa, and you saw a person that just breathed. Nothing had happened to him as a human being. Like everything just was outside, like a terrifying silence that I cannot even tell you about it. There are no words to it, because this silence was screaming more than any scream that I heard in my life. And so this is one possibility. One is, okay, I cannot talk. Every word in this situation will be completely inappropriate. I have to contain here, or to understand and to grasp somehow what happened here. No word will describe it. No communication is going to help me. I have to deal with it within myself. And I think when we read what after this, like, heroic words, Vayidom Aaron, he was silent, but it was not just silent. Vayidom, Dmama means, as I say, like a silence which is more powerful than a scream. Right after, Aaron continued with the day and the ritual and his job and his mission in the temple, like containing the terrible grief on one hand, but at the same time not forgetting his mission in life as a Kohen Gadol, which to me is just unbelievable, the ability of one person to contain the worst feelings of loss, and at the same time to remember I'm a leader. People look at me. I have to teach them also how to deal with tragedies. And that's the hardest lesson, because at this moment you are for yourself. You just need to be like with your family, with the other two children who survived, with your wife. But Aaron continues. He knows that he's a leader, and everyone look at him and take a lesson. And I want to tell you, I saw people again, and I'm sure that you saw also, like looking at them after tragedy hit, you learn, you inspired by the way they deal with it. And it's not the common thing, but there are great people that the way they deal with tragedy is inspiration to other people when they hit a tragedy. And unfortunately, all of us through our life hit all kinds of tragedies. And you can draw lots of power and resilience from seeing how other people went through tragedy, and nevertheless they grew from it, they dealt with it, they processed it, and they did not let themselves to break and to collapse into themselves. And I think that was the shtika of Aaron. At this moment, I cannot talk, I cannot communicate. It's not time for sermons. It's time to show people that at a certain time you stay with no words and you continue your mission.
There's a song called "Silence is Golden," and there's an idea within the Talmud Shtika kehodadami
Right.
that when one is quiet, it's as though they're admitting something. So I think your idea that there's a lot of meaning and enunciation of very important ideas and thoughts within silence is a very good one. And when you speak about watching people who went through great tragedy and did so with great elegance and strength, my sister Chavi comes to mind, whom we have spoken about before. Her husband was murdered, leaving over 6 children for my sister Chavi to raise. And I remember at the funeral, Rabbi, how she walked into the shul and did so with her head up and strong. And we discussed it later. And she said, I had to do that for my children. And I had to do that for the community. She was conscious after losing the apple of her eye that she too was a mom and that she was a leader. And she has done that throughout the years brilliantly, with great courage and with great bravery.
Absolutely. We used to talk about Jewish princess, but for me, Javi, your sister, she wouldn't like me to say it, on the openly, she's a Jewish queen. No questions about this one.
Thank you. Nadav and Avihu offer a strange fire. It's a very interesting phrase in the Torah, which Rashi says was unauthorized, but possibly zealous, response to zealousness. Frankel suggests meaning comes from intention, even in failure. Were their actions a misguided search for divine connection, Nadav and Avihu's? And how do we balance passion with discipline in our pursuits?
Yeah, I think it's 100% the description of what happened in Shmini. And it's a strange thing because we have many opinions what exactly happened. What is the Esh Zara? And I would say when you have many opinions, what was the sin? It means that the Torah did not want to talk about it openly. Because otherwise, why do you need to bring so many opinions? What exactly was their mistake? The Torah says Esh Zara, which is a very, by itself, strange, no pun intended, because Esh Zara is a strange or different or foreign fire. Um, um, and to me, it aligns very well with what Frankel said, because it's not important why they died. This is not the message of the Torah. Obviously, we have to learn from here. And, according to one opinion, they came on a high mode because they were drinking wine. They wanted to enhance their spiritual experience. Their intentions were very, very good. But there is a ritual. There are laws how you enter the temple. There are laws how you respect the temple. Some opinions were that they did not want to marry and have children. There are all kind of opinions. But I think that the real perush, especially after reading Frankel, that's not the story here. The story is the reaction of Aaron and the Kohen Gadol. So it doesn't make much difference. Many times I go to Shiva and people ask, so how exactly he died? Like it was like he was sick before, it wasn't sick before. Well, this is not like a time for investigation, although it's very normal because sometimes you want to look for common ground to talk to the Avelim and to talk about the deceased person and you want to know a little bit more details. But does it make a difference if a person died from a heart attack or cancer or any other reason in the world? The fact is that a loved one is lost to the family, to the widow, to the children, to the parents. And I think that Frankel suggests all of us to focus on, okay, what next? What do we have to do? And that's the whole idea of Shiva and Shloshim and the year in Jewish tradition. It means, of course, you have to cry. Of course, you have to remember the deceased. But 7 days, you don't stay in your house more than 7 days. You have to leave the house. You have to know that everything has boundaries. You have Shloshim to grasp the idea, to go outside, to tell people I'm in a delicate situation. You grow your beard, you grow your hair. So people ask what happened. Like, sometimes I go to shul and I see a person, I did not hear anything. And when I see him, I understand that something happened. And I come and ask what happened. And I understand that you are in a velut. So this is a way to communicate with the world with no words, by the way. People know that you are in a velut, right? And then you have a year, and then you have the yortzeit. But the Torah does not want us, because sometimes it's very, very easy, especially parents. They can't get out of it. I think I told you once about one of my friends that after he was killed in the Lebanon war, the father went every single day to the grave to talk to his child. That's it. His life were over when his son's life were over. And the Torah certainly don't want us to react this way. The Torah wants us to continue with our life. And this is a story about Aaron. So does it make a big difference what exactly they died from? Well, Frankel and I think maybe the Torah are telling us, no, it's not that important. It's important how Aaron and how the temple rituals continued after that.
With that, Rabbi, some of the interpretations on the death of Nadav and Avihu, you commented on Rashi. I think there's an overall belief that the two sons were inebriated. In Sanhedrin 52a, another approach found in the Talmud emphasizes that Nadav and Avihu acted arrogantly by offering fire without divine instruction or consultation with Moses and Aaron. Sanhedrin 52a suggests they presumed to innovate in the divine service, bypassing the chain of authority. The Midrash Vayikra Rabbah states a more sympathetic interpretation. It says that Nadav and Avihu were exceptionally pious, consumed by an intense desire to draw closer to God. And their unauthorized fire is seen as a misguided sort of action to indeed make them more godly. And their death, in this view, was a divine act of bringing them closer to God. So whichever approach you take, I think the idea, as we discussed Shivim Panim, the 70 approaches to Torah and to truth, is that there are many, many different ways of seeing the death of Nadav and Avihu, right?
Absolutely. And, we discussed many, many times the part of Midrash in interpreting the text itself. And I think this is a classic example. You have only two words, Esh Zara, foreign fire. And from here, I think we have something around 20 different explanations. What does that mean? Now, no one was there to see that they came drunk into the temple. But we do know that the first thing that Aaron is commanded about after the case was that his children should not come drunk into the temple. So we assume, we don't know exactly why they died. And here you see this command given now, Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aaron, that they have to come in a very decent, in a certain decorum to the temple. You connect the dots. There are many other explanations that no one was there to know exactly what happened. But I'll tell you what I think. I think that the sages knew what are the dangers and the dynamics between young people and old people and what could go wrong. And they just saw in their yeshiva. The people who bring these ideas, I'm not sure that even they got it like as a masoret from their rabbis, but they just had to look around. I can see everywhere sometimes like these young people who are more zealous than the rabbi itself. They are more religious than the Pope. The Pope who passed away yesterday. But you know what I mean.
You were going to say rest in peace, weren't you?
Yeah.
But you weren't quite sure. Okay, I got it.
What do you know? Like in Latin, what is a Pope? They call it Magnum Papa, which means like the Kohen Gadol. And if you go to the Sistine Chapel, Do you know that it's exactly the measures of Kodesh HaKodashim? You didn't know that, but it's important to know. No. I'm seriously
You're right.
like,
I didn't know that. Yeah.
yeah, it's they see themselves as a replacement to the priesthood, and the Kohen Gadol and so on, and see the beautiful clothing of the Pope and Big Day Laban many times, and sometimes with like the golden garment and so on, because theologically they see themselves as the people who replace the Jewish tradition. So that's not the purpose of our discussion, but the Pope passed away yesterday. After all, he's the leader of billions of people. Let's give it due respect. Unfortunately, his attitude and approach towards Israel and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict does not align with my hashkafa. But we have maybe thousands followers. He has 1 billion followers. I guess that in today's world, like billion followers is more important than few hundreds. So as I said, let's give him like the due respect. But what I want to say is that indeed all the service in the Mishkan and the place of Aaron and his children and the nation, and the congregation is a story here. Is a story, and the continuation after a tragedy is the main story apparently in Shmini.
Rabbi, what was your sense as to why the other two sons of Aaron were not to mourn, at least at that point, yet the Bnei Yisrael were instructed to mourn for the loss of Nadav and Avihu?
I think it depends on the understanding of what priesthood means. When a person is mourning, he lost something. There is a vacuum in his life. And this vacuum has to be mourned and reconciled and accepted with all the different stages of mourning. But there is one place that you cannot talk about losing anything. And this is when you in front of God. Because God is everything. God, like in the presence of God, you lack nothing. And I think this idea is extremely important when we come to the priesthood idea. You are serving in front of God, missing even a relative, as hard as it is. The maximum you can do is to stay quiet. Vayidomaon. And the Torah said, actually, maybe that explains more than anything else. Your question actually inspired me to think that maybe this is the lesson of the entire event. In front of God, everything is like perfect. And you cannot show in front of God anything that you miss or lose, because God will fill every lacuna, everything that does not exist. And remember, for example, the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to leave the temple area, even for the funeral of his parents or his relatives, because he represents more than anyone else the temple at the place where you are in front of God. And in front of God, there is no place for mourning. It's like Oz ve'adar lefanav, bo lefanav birnana. There is a whole concept of simcha when you are before God. By the way, that's the reason why on the three regalim, we are going to the temple. Why? Because in order to rejoice, there is one place that you rejoice, and it's not Wonderland or Disneyland. It's like standing in front of God. That's the absolute simcha.
Rabbi, I just want to comment on Nadav and Avihu, and we'll conclude with that part of this podcast today with this. Rabbi Sachs, Zacharenu Livracha, talks about the spontaneity of the prophet and the discipline, the following of rules of the Kohen. And that Nadav and Avihu mixed that up. Moshe Rabbeinu, as the greatest prophet who ever lived, he was responsible for being flexible. He was responsible for adjusting when the case required him to do so. And when the message from God would come down, he would have to articulate that in such a way that there was spontaneity amongst the people, that they could move, that they could adjust according to their character, according to their personality. Where the Kohen, especially the Kohen Gadol, as you spoke of, he was responsible for following rules, for being disciplined in a ritualistic environment, which did not allow him to be spontaneous. Rabbi Sachs, he speaks about how Nadav and Avihu confused this. They wanted to be more of the prophet. So they brought along this very strange smoke, this very strange fire, which was a spontaneous move, not one's following the rules of God. It's a nice thought,
nice
isn't it?
thought. I would say, I did not see it in Rabbi Sachs, but I would say, listen, there is lots of room to be spontaneous in your relationship with God. But apparently the place of the Mishkan, the place of the temple, requires rituals and very profound one. You know, one of the things that really made a huge impression on me was to see parts of the funeral of Queen Elizabeth. And you can see there like rituals, which I guess going hundreds of years back, and where a person stands, who come to visit, how he walks next to you see the idea of malchut, the idea of kingship. And by the way, this was encouraged by Chazal so much that they say that Kohanim can even violate certain Tuma de Rabbanan, things which are rabbinical in nature and not biblical one, in order to go to see a marching of kings or inaugurations of kings, because if you are going to be zoche, if you are going to have the merit, one day you will see the difference between the kavod and the respect we give to a Jewish king compared to a non-Jewish king. So looking at this give you some idea that we, the Jewish people, lost for long, like this idea of a king, of a queen, of what does it mean? And every ritual has to be like exactly. And there are many people who teach the family of the queen. What do they have to do? How do they have to walk? In what pace? From what direction? There is zero spontaneity. At this event, it's all about rituals. And you ask yourself, wait a second, these people just lost their mom. Okay, she was the king of England, but she was the queen of England, but still they are children. Give them something like to hold the coffee into. No. When you come to kingdom, when you come to kingship, to queenship, whatever it is, you have rules. And I think this is the place of Beit HaMikdash. What they did then when they came home, hopefully they cried, they went through the albums, they received people who came to console them and so on. Over there, I think that there is a lot of room to be yourself and to be spontaneous about your reactions. So apparently there is a difference between the temple and your own house. In Tefillah, for example, we have words, we have a certain a version of the Seder. We have to say Shema before Vayayim Shamoa. We have to say this before Shmones. We have order. Like in Leila Seder, we have Kadesh Ruchat. We have an order to do things. But obviously, at the end of the day, there is a lot of place for your expression. By the way, if you ask me, I'll tell you what. I want to quote a very interesting discussion between Shai Agnon and Professor Leibowitz. Shai Agnon, that we had the honor to open our series with his book, asked Professor Leibowitz, a very known intellectual. He had 7 PhD in different areas, from medicine to chemistry to philosophy to you name it. Like, he was a real genius. And Agnon asked him once, tell me, why today the Jewish community is not as sincere and like had this emotion that I remember from Poland, from Galicia. What happened to us? And Leibowitz summarized it in a very interesting sentence. And to me, it's a motto, actually. It's how to look upon religious life. And he said, you know, instead of being Jews of Torah, we became Jews of Shulchan Aruch. Now, you talk about two people who are Orthodox people. But I think Leibowitz hit here a very important point. There is Jewish life of Shulchan Aruch. You just look what the Mishnah Berurah said, what the Magen Avraham said, what these commentators say, what the Shulchan Aruch say. Your life became so not spontaneous with religious feeling that it's actually almost like chains on you. So people cannot really develop a personality and building a character of Jew by being a Jew of Shulchan Aruch. Now, I don't dismiss, obviously, again, you know, in religious life, like Aaron, his children, you have to follow certain guidelines, but you have to remember, at the end of the day, it's about your heart. It's about like how you feel about all this. And they looked for this expression of their own, of their love of God, but it was in the wrong place. So I think it's a very important lesson. Religious life is about both. It's about the Shulchan Aruch, but it's also about the Torah and about inspiration and about the joy that comes from doing mitzvot. And if people become too much Jews of the Shulchan Aruch, they lose, in a way, this feeling of joy and happiness that the Torah is always talking about.
Rabbi, I adore your eclectic understanding of knowledge and wisdom. Just adore it. I also want to conclude this part, the nut of an Avihu part, by just adding, and I made a note of saying this at the top of our shir today, our podcast, because I was really taken by it. The job of the Kohen Gadol is crazy. It's crazy. And let me give you an example why I say that. Because when someone kills by accident, they go into a city of refuge. They cannot leave that city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol dies, right? And there's all kinds of machinations around that. The Gemara in Makot talks about it extensively, which is what we're learning now in Daf Yomi. But the Gemara talks about is that the Kohen Gadol did not reach out to the community well enough, did not make that community good enough, right? Teaching them Torah and teaching them morals and the values of Torah and God. And therefore, even by accident, this fellow killed. Therefore, he cannot leave until the Kohen Gadol dies. But here's my part B, which touched me so much as the death of Nadav and Avihu did, and how Aaron must have felt after that. The Mishnah says in Makos, I believe it's 11, I believe it's page 11, that a mother of the Kohen Gadol would make clothing and food for those who had run away to the city of refuge. Why? Because those who had killed by accident, they were waiting for the Kohen Gadol to die. They were waiting for the Kohen Gadol to die so that they could leave the city of refuge. The mother of the Kohen Gadol would stitch together clothing for them. She would cook food for them, and she would take it to them. You okay there?
Yeah.
She would take it to them. Why? Beseeching them, asking them, please do not pray for the death of my son. Oh, it was so touching when I learned that. So touching. Do you have any thoughts on that, Rabbi?
First of all, you know, it's. I wonder why the Torah tied the death of the Kohen Gadol to the release of the person who killed mistakenly. And, you know, I think there is a huge lesson to every educator, every rabbi there. The Torah indeed tied. The Torah said, you're a Kohen Gadol and it's beautiful to go on Yom Kippur to Kodesh HaKodashim and to be in the center, in the limelight. But what is your real job? To inspire the Jewish people.
Yes.
And if you fail to do it, even in a remote way, because after all, what are we talking here about? Like a person that mistakenly killed the person in a car accident. That means that you did not reach every Jew and teach him the value of life. Because when people really appreciate value of life, they will drive slowly, they will keep all the road rules, they will stop completely in a stop sign. And you, the Kohen Gadol, apparently failed to inspire other Kohanim, other people, other rabbis, other leaders to talk about these issues. And we see the top of the hierarchy of education, which is the Kohen Gadol, and the person who is responsible for a random car accident that happened in Yupetzville somewhere, because his job is to reach, of course, down the line through other leaders to make sure that every Jew appreciates the life of another person to the point that even accidents will not happen. And I have to tell you, this Gemara is haunting me as an educator, because every time that I see one of my students, or I hear about a student even from 20 years ago that did something which I'm not very proud of, or he should not be very proud of, I say, wait a second, where are you in this story?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe you did not inspire him when you could. And honestly, like, this is the greatest feeling of guilt that I feel as an educator. What about the people who you missed, who you did not inspire? And maybe you could. So to me, this Gemara is always a source of guilt. I have to say that. And the Jewish mother, that's incredible. Like this story that you think beyond it, and you take into account that people, when they are on freedom, depends on the death of someone else, they might pray that this person will die in order to release it. Now, you know what is a prayer? I don't think that any Jew go and in Shmona Esrei say, Ribono Shel Olam, please hear my voice, make the Kohen Gadol like ill, and hopefully he will die within a week, because I really, really want to go back to my place and to be part of society. I don't think that any Jew do it. But that one of the Rebbe said, a sigh of a Jew is also a form of prayer.
Yes.
So, the people, the fact that they know and they say, oh, like, when he will die, I will be free. This was a prayer, and the mothers of Kohanim Gdolim wanted to avoid even this form of prayer, which is very touching. I agree with you. It's
Rabbi, where do we find enough that a general was killed and the mother was crying?
Oh, this is about Sisra. It's about non-Jewish. Actually,
Yes.
He was Sisra. He was the general of Yavin Melech Hatzor, who was killed by Yael. And in the song of the victory of the Jewish people, there is two psukim which are talking about his mother is like standing in the window, and she used to see her son coming always victorious, and she's waiting and he's not coming, and all her friends are telling her, don't worry, he's just apparently busy with taking all the goods of the war, but in her heart she knows that something awful happened. And it says, "Vatiyabev em Sisra," like she was crying, she was sobbing. And a very interesting thing is that our Tkiyat Shofar on Rosh Hashanah is modeled after this sobbing of the mother of a non-Jewish or an enemy general. But the crying of a mother is the most sincere thing. And the loss of a child is the most profound tragedy that can happen to a mother. And our Tkiya Chofa, when we want to understand like what means a din is maybe facing such a tragedy, you have to pray for avoiding such a tragedy. She modeled it after this mother who is crying for her son.
Parsha Shmini deals with the laws of kashrut, including the fact that we can only eat meat from animals that chew their cud and have split hooves. We can only eat fish that have scales and fins. And then there are particular birds that are mentioned within the Parsha that we are allowed to eat. Leviticus 11:44 calls for holiness through dietary laws. How did these laws create a unique sense of purpose for Israel? And what personal boundaries give your life meaning? And this is also in the context of Viktor Frankl, who said the meaning of life differs from man to man. Why kashrut?
Love this question, which you tied beautifully to the book. The Jewish people are special people. And as I said, we are today, 15 million people, and we have our own calendar. We have our own diet because we are special. You know, if you go to athletes, for example, they have a very strict diet. They cannot eat too much fat. They have to build the muscle. And they know that they suffer, by the way, for a purpose. Like they want to be great athletes. They want to win medals. They want to be at the top of their branch, if it's like swimming or running or basketball, whatever it is. And they take it upon themselves like with love. They know that they will be better athletes once they keeping a very strict diet. And we know it scientifically that, you know, people who want to achieve certain physical achievement, they need a special diet. So think about the nation that have to achieve spiritual achievement. Well, I can tell you one thing that I don't understand why deer will not affect your spiritual achievements and why a pig is going to affect it, why a camel is going to affect your spiritual achievement, and another animal will actually align with your spiritual goals. I trust God that He knows how every animal might influence your spiritual achievement. But it comes for a purpose. And when you have a purpose, as Viktor Frankl said, like the why is not so important. The how and the how, what kind of a purpose we relate to something is the way that we deal with it. So to me, every time that I keep kosher, I said, okay, well, apparently has to be a special person because God assigned me a certain diet and I cannot eat this and this and this. So that's the way I see it. You know, another way from a traveler, I can tell you something very interesting. If you keep kosher, you always have to be somehow tied to the Jewish community because you have to look for kosher butchery and kosher fish. And so it's a very interesting way, I think, of the Torah to keep Jews together, because if you could eat everything, you could be everywhere in the world and you wouldn't care like about the Jewish community. That's I learned later in my life how much like we cannot do certain things because we always have to think about like, you know, kosher food. And that's why you know, the Bathurst is a Jewish street because like people need to be together in shuls, be together in the butcher shop, in the supermarket, in the kosher supermarket, and so on. So it keeps them together. It's a nice way to keep people together.
So forget Bathurst. Forget Bathurst Street. Tell me about the kosher restaurant that you found in Rome.
That's
Did you
amazing.
indeed
They are
find
all
one?
on one street in the ghetto. Um, Well, I'm not an expert in food in general. I always say that after you were in the army, every meal is good. You know, if it's Italian or Chinese or French, it's much better than what you ate from the, you know, the loaf of meat in boxes in. Yeah, so everything is good, Baruch Hashem. Although I hear that today, like food in the army is, Baruch Hashem, much better than was in my time. And yeah, the Italian food, the ghetto food. I think I told you once that once we were in Baghetto, in that's the name. It's a name, nice name, Baghetto, like baguette and Baghetto in the ghetto. Um, we sat next to a couple that came from Belgium, and I assumed if he come to a kosher restaurant that he's Jewish, and very soon I realized that he knows nothing about Jews, and I asked him like, what are you doing? So he told me he's a doctor in Brussels, but he was born in Italy, and his mother always told him, if you want to eat real Italian food, go to the Jewish ghetto. So he said, when I come to Rome, I don't go to all the fancy restaurants. I come to the ghetto to eat real Italian food.
Nice. Very nice. By the way, I had that same feeling about after eating yeshiva food for 6 years in dormitory as you had about IDF food. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read you a poem, please, on the Parsha Shmini, vis-a-vis or through the lens of man's search for meaning, and I was able to find this on AI, and it goes as follows. On the 8th day, a fire wakes the dawn. The altar hums. Aaron's hands stretch long. Offerings rise, their smoke a fragile thread. God's flame descends and awe consumes the bread. Yet meaning, Frankel whispers, lives in choice. In every breath, the soul can find its voice. The people shout, their faces kiss the ground. Meaning's joy, a purpose. But not of an view, hearts ablaze, cast strange fire through the sacred haze. Their zeal unbid meets heaven's silent roar, and flames of God leaves ashes on the floor. What meaning lies in sparks that burn too fast? Frankel's truth holds, suffering not the last. Aaron, struck mute, his silence weaves a prayer, a father's grief, yet faith still lingers there. Suffering, says Frankel, bears a hidden call, to choose to grow, to rise where others fall. So Aaron stands, his heart a Corban true, each tear an offering, each step a vow renewed. The laws unfold, cut and hoof, fin and scale, a map of meals where holiness prevails. To eat is to choose, to carve a sacred way, each bite a chance to sanctify the day. Frankel's pen traces meaning hour by hour, no life too small for purpose to empower. In Shmini's code, the mundane lifts its face, a call to be holy, to seek a higher grace. From altar's glow to tragedy's sharp sting, from rules that bind to freedom's quiet spring, Shmini and Frankel join to softly sing. Meaning waits in all, our task to let it ring. Whoa. Whoa. Mata Hoshev.
This is also like Grok or
Yeah, it's
AI.
Grok. It's Grok.
You know what? Maybe
Nice,
I should explore this one.
Much better than ChatGPT. Much more meaning.
Wow.
I like. I have to tell you, Rabbi, I can sense here at home, and you're at school, I can sense your sadness after going to that Holocaust program. I can sense it, and
it still resonate. Like, yeah, you're right. But I have to say the following. I want to give like a full impression. I was very encouraged to see many non-Jews around us coming to the exhibition. It means that it says something very powerful to every person. The exhibition itself is meaningful. You can see that they invested lots of thought and conveying their message in a very powerful way. But as I say, like to me as a Jew, something was terribly missing. But still, I would advise every person to go and see this exhibition.
Rabbi, this week is a very important week. April 24th, God willing, is my birthday, and that's a really big deal. And thank you. On April 27th is my 65th birthday. And I'm very excited. it's a groundbreaking birthday, I believe. I'm very much into birthdays, as we've spoken about in the past. That was that moment, exactly that time in history when Avram Rosenzweig was brought into this world. Never was there Avram Rosenzweig, never will there be an Avram Rosenzweig. And I don't say this out of arrogance. I say this out of deep pride and love for who I am and being created in the image of God. And not only that, the 65th birthday actually comes with some money. It's a
You
nice
get
thing.
like, I think, a free a prescription or something like that.
So that's part of it. But I get the old age pension at 65 years old, Rabbi. 65. Wow.
Okay,
Can't
you
believe
are
it.
young, Avrum.
Yeah, I am young in spirit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This was a masterful, masterfully done, Rabbi. I was so excited about your insights and your eclectic grasp and of knowledge. And I thank you so much for this. It was magnificent. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. And as I said, send me the bill because I feel like, you know, feel that part of the burden that was like heavy weighting on me
Thank
was
God.
lifted. Thank you.
Thank God. Thank God. You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, our prayers go out to the IDF soldiers and their families and to the hostages. They should be delivered back to us today. We wish you a beautiful Shabbat coming up, and study Parsha Shmini on your own, because you will bring your own voice to it. You will bring your own thoughts to it. And if you haven't read Viktor Frankl's Search for Meaning, even if you have, pull it off your shelf, order it on Amazon. There's lots of copies there that are very affordable. I know because I keep ordering it, and start to learn it, because it is truly one of the finest books ever written, at least in our time, having to do with purpose and meaning, and Frankel's idea of logotherapy. Until we meet again, thank you, Zeigazin, as they say in Yiddish, and Rabbi, great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avrum.